Good afternoon, good evening, hello, wherever you are. Welcome to ALBW Live. I am Pat Escate. I am the organizer of Ann Lister Birthday Week, cheesy promo, coming your way in July of 2021, July 11th through the 18th. So as most of you know who have been following us, we've been having a great time talking about both the real Ann Lister as well as the character in Sally Wainwright's fabulous Gentleman Jack. And today we are so delighted to have with us Tom Pye, the costume designer for Gentleman Jack. So Tom, there we go. Hey Tom, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good, I'm excellent, thank you. I'm excellent. So Tom, all I've told people so far is that you're the costume designer for Gentleman Jack, but you actually come from the world of set design and moved into costume design. And let me just say that you've done this for a variety of mediums, including the Metropolitan Opera here in New York. But could you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in set and then costume design?
I trained in theatre design, which covers both of it. So I trained in both costume and set. But from the minute I left college, I was working a lot in TV and film. Probably for the first 10 years of, I used to design for MTV Europe and all sorts of things. But I've always been interested in sort of both set and costume and TV and theatre. And it's the stuff in between the two that interests me.
Excellent. And you did share with me in our prior conversation that one of the things that led you more into this more creative medium was the fact that you're dyslexic, correct?
True, yes. Yeah. I mean, school didn't work out that brilliantly for me. It wasn't that great because I was dyslexic and they didn't recognize it till I was about 14.
Wow.
So I left school when I was about 15 and just went to art college, which was a great decision. And so I did 5 years of art college, which was great. It was really informative and and then the stuff I learned at art college, I still use every single day. I mean, really, completely useful color theory and composition and all that kind of thing. So yeah, it was a good choice made very young.
I thank you for sharing that. I always, when our guests tell us something like that, I always like to bring that up so that the people out there that are dealing with that have some knowledge that there's a bigger life ahead of them.
There are other ways. Yeah.
So let me ask you this: when you're working across the different mediums, does that have an impact on how you do your work? And you mentioned something about the detail that's available.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people think theatre people can't design for stage, and there's a sort of prejudice that everything on stage is done with glue guns and gluing
Velcro.
on and Velcro and all that, and it's nonsense, really. I mean, in these days of HD performances, of just about everything I design on stage ends up, or regularly ends up in cinemas and beamed live. Certainly, all the Met shows.
Yes. Yeah.
So you are always thinking about that kind of detail, but in TV and film, you do get to enjoy it that bit much more. I mean, the camera is always here, and you're always going to be able to really enjoy that detail. But it's not like it's not there in stage. I mean, I wouldn't put an actor into something that was just a big, generalization. You want that detail there for them, for their character, and for them to. It's an important transformation for that actor when they put their costume on.
It helps inform their work, right? I mean,
and I think, I think in stage it's part of the process of becoming that person every day when they get into that dressing room.
Now that you mention this, and we didn't talk about this before, but when we had Saran on, that was one of the things that she pointed out was getting into that clothing and actually how much she missed that clothing once they were done with production. So,
really?
See?
Wow, that surprises me. But the bit about it being important and it's sort of transforming and helping her, absolutely. But I'm surprised she missed it because it was a lot of it, and it was very hot. Probably not the corset. Probably not the millions of layers.
Right, right.
Yeah,
I guess maybe what she was talking about is the way that it made her feel because it is a
I hope so.
very
Yeah,
dynamic character.
yeah.
Um, so you first heard about Gentleman Jack when you were working with Sally on another one of her, and I have to say this, incredibly fabulous productions, which was to Walk Invisible, the story of the Brontes.
That's
That-
correct.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, amazingly, she told me about the project on the night before we started the first day of filming on that,
Oh
and
wow.
sort of offered me the job, and I was sort of gobsmacked. And the minute she described the story, I was kind of so eager and so keen to do it. Um,
Right.
I mean, it's such an important story, and these stories don't get told enough, and are
Yes.
too regularly swept under carpets. So it's thrilling to be involved in something like this.
Yes, and she certainly is a woman in full now to the world, which is, really quite wonderful.
Yeah.
The You did have a chance because you were up in Haworth to run over to Shibden Hall and take a look at it while you were still working on To Walk Invisible.
Yes, that's right. So that would have been 2017, I think. Yeah, and I was struck by. I mean, there was mention of Anne Lister then, but it was very subtly worded, carefully worded in rather, you know, polite language.
Right.
So that was interesting. But such a beautiful house and such a great atmosphere.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, it was thrilling to walk in there and imagine.
It has an amazing vibe to it. I can
It does.
certainly vouch for that.
Yeah.
And you said that the sort of the feel that you got of the place, it had a very Elizabethan. Obviously, it's very, for those of you who haven't been to Shibden Hall yet, it's very dark. The wood's all dark. Ceilings are relatively low. But you said it had an Elizabethan feel, and there was something about Anne's portrait that you picked up.
Yes. Yeah, that sort of little ruff that she wears in the portrait, I was really fascinated by that and that sort of echo of Elizabethan. Um, and it got me thinking that, the color palette of that house
Mm.
might want to reflect that and might want to be kind of rich and warm. And I mean, it's a lovely, warm, cozy kind of house. And
Yes.
it's not what was being built at the time. It's not what Anne Walker's house would have been.
Right.
Uh, it's the opposite of Georgian, and it's sort of cozy, rich, dark, low, um,
Right. With tons of history in it,
with
and
tons of history, and that's
yeah.
lovely. That sort of layered feeling for a house. And so, yeah, I wanted the costumes of all the members of that family and the staff to reflect that, and also to help the audience really, because I feel there's a fair amount of storytelling needed. That there's so many different houses. As I was reading the scripts, I was kind of, okay, which house is that, and how
Oh,
and
right.
how many sets of livery do I have to do? And
Yeah.
so the clearer we could be about each house, and I work with Anne Pritchard, the brilliant production designer, and we met many times and talked about color. And what was great was I did color palettes, she did color palettes, and we were completely aligned with each other. And
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
yeah, and then got excited and bounced off each other, and it was really good
We get to speak to
collaboration.
her in, let's see, I think it's in late August. So, and I've already had my conversation with her, and she's fabulous. I mean,
She's
what
great.
fun! What
Yeah,
fun!
really good fun.
So obviously going into Shibden Hall and having the luxury of doing that 18 months out, that which isn't the normal time period that you really get, is it?
Well, it's not for TV and film, not at all.
Yeah.
But for stage, it is a bit. Yeah, I do work on. I mean, I'm working on things for 2023 at the moment.
Mm,
So yes, I do have that luxury in opera and in ballet.
mm.
So for me, it was quite great actually, because it meant that I could stew and brew and worry and
Right. And freak
research
out.
and freak out and yeah, stay awake for 18 months. It was fine. It's good.
So you start out with this beginning image of Anne Lister and her family in Shibden Hall, but then you also have to broaden out into the rest of society, and you go through the process of trying to find other images that might help you. And you shared with me that one of the things that you were trying to figure out is in that world, why would somebody call a woman in a corset and a skirt Gentleman Jack? But you found something, didn't you, that would help you on that?
I did, yeah. The sort of key. I mean, I was sort of panicking about how to express to a contemporary audience that why she was nicknamed Gentleman Jack. And when the TV series was named Gentleman Jack, I thought, oh God, I've really got to answer this.
Yeah.
This is really important. And I couldn't figure out, the more research I did working with Anne Joma on what was in the diary, we all mentioned petticoats and corsets and all these female pieces of clothing. And I thought, wearing black isn't really enough for a contemporary audience. If you imagine Anne Lister and plonked her in Shoreditch High Street, I don't know if that would work, or what would I say, Brooklyn, in 2020, it wouldn't be that surprising a look. It wouldn't be that extraordinary. I mean, it might turn your head, but you wouldn't think, oh, there's a bloke.
Right.
So I was actually in Todmorden, and I came across this. I was looking at cartoons because Sally had mentioned looking at satirical drawings, and I happened to go into a junk shop, and they had a big stack, and I found this amazing satirical cartoon. I think it's called The Park, 1830, and it's clearly somebody contemporary just having a laugh at the fashion of the time. And when I saw that, I thought, yes, that's my key. It's not entirely about, I mean, it's important what she wears, but it's not entirely about that. It's about context. It's about what Anne looked like compared to everyone else.
Right.
And in this period, it was incredibly extreme. The Romantic period, women were dressed up like sort of dolls with these tiny waists and these enormous gigot sleeves. I mean, it was a mad, extreme fashion. And that drawing really made me laugh. And I thought, yes, that answers what Sally had been talking to me about it being a very different atmosphere to Walk Invisible, it being a sort of bigger, bolder, grander thing that had more energy. And not that Walk Invisible didn't have energy, but a different kind of energy.
It had a very different kind of energy.
It did, yeah.
We talked about this briefly in one of the other interviews, and my sense out of To Walk Invisible is that I felt like I was watching a family headed for disaster the entire time, right?
Yeah. The first thing I said to Sally about that script was it reminded me of Greek tragedies. It's got that same kind of snowballing of where this is going, and you can't stop watching, and it's horrible because that it's kind of.
But for those of you who haven't seen To Walk Invisible, it's really one of the most extraordinary pieces that I've seen in quite a while. So do check that out. So let's talk a little bit about, so now you're focusing in on basically building Anne Lister from the ground up when it comes to her costumes, et cetera. And we have a good deal of information about her. You had something to work with. You knew that she traveled a lot. You knew that she lived in Paris for 5 years, and you certainly can't ignore fashion over there.
Yeah.
And she had a very wide variety of things that she was doing during the days. So can you talk a little bit about how that influenced what you were doing when you were creating the look?
Yeah, I mean, it really did. I mean, she was clearly a very well read and widely traveled woman. She was clearly very intelligent. But research was really my first step, and I just did as much research as I possibly could. Talking with Anne and reading the diaries and going through all that, but also looking at original clothing in museums and lots and lots and lots of going backstage at museums to look at how clothes were constructed.
Wow.
Looking at contemporary drawings, and then just looking at queer women through history. That was also really helpful.
Oh, interesting.
All sorts of just to get ideas. And Sally came up with ideas like she saw this pair of boots and went, oh, these are really great, and I was like, oh, they're lovely, but they're completely wrong, they're 1880s. But it got me thinking about Vita Sackville West and her boots, and which led me on to the idea of, okay, they didn't have boots like that then, but they did have gaiters. So there are all sorts of threads, and my feeling about research is it just sort of widens your design vocabulary. The more you kind of know about a period, then the more you can sort of pull from and think, okay, I'm trying to express this. Oh, maybe I could use that weird thing that they did, like the inner waistcoats that was a Regency thing when I wanted to give a sort of business look for Anne.
Right.
There's
Right.
she wears the sort of double waistcoat of the Regency gentleman. So,
Right.
details like that just come from research. But I mean, the main thing was then working with Saran. Um, it's all just up here, um,
Right. Right. Right.
until you get in a fitting with
So
an actor, and then it becomes a collaboration.
let's segue off on that a little bit. And we hadn't talked about this before, but when you're working with particular actors, there, as you just said, that it is a collaboration. So how does that influence you? I mean, it's got to be more than just body type, right? It's the way they
Yeah,
move. What is that?
I mean, I was thinking about this. I think a really good costume fitting is one where you go into it with lots of ideas and lots of research, and then you come out of it going, forget all of that, and you try something else. And everyone in the room has a voice, and you try things, and you go, "No, that doesn't work for some reason," and you find other things, and you snowball off each other and bounce ideas. I mean, the brilliant thing we did with Saran was the first fitting. I managed to get Gina, who's the head of women's wear, and Ross, head of menswear at Cosprop,
Oh,
and we used all the possibilities of men's clothes and women's clothes, and we just had a big dress up.
oh my
And
God.
that was just so much fun and
Oh,
so
what fun.
informative. Yeah, it was brilliant. And I think it was really, really helpful for both me and Saran, and Sally. She saw photos of it. But that was the basis. That's where we really began, and then more research, and then starting making things. And
Right. And you also had the great good fortune, really, to be uh, dealing with Halifax, where all the great woolen mills were during Anne's time. So it wasn't as
yeah.
if she wasn't living out in the sticks where she could not have gotten a hold of good fabric, right?
No, no. I mean, that's what's exciting about. I mean, it was a good excuse to be able to use any fabric I wanted, because
Mhm.
she would have been able to. I mean, she really would have been in the center of great fabrics. But what was lovely was it was also good for me, and the team when we were filming. We had, all those mills are still open. Not all
Yeah,
of them, but a lot of them are still open.
yeah.
And some of the best fabrics in the world are made just up the road from Shibden Hall.
Isn't that
So
something?
it was
Yeah.
great. So, I was popping into mill shops and knowing all the people in each of those mills and saying, I need some wool, I need something heavy, I need something. So it was great. It was really, it
You
couldn't
had
be a better
the
place to
experts
film.
right at your fingertips. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And the real thing.
Yeah. So you had so with Anne, Matt Gray was telling us a couple of weeks ago that one of the things that he knew was that she was the hero of the story, and that caused him to shoot her a particular way. But coming below eye line, going up, those kinds of things. Did that influence your work at all? Is there something that you do to make her more distinctive other than just the what she's dressed in?
Movement was important.
Ah,
Yeah, I didn't know entirely how Matt was going to film, but I think I had an idea that he was going to do that, those kind of low shots. And I mean,
yeah,
certainly there was a lot mentioned in the scripts of her striding down the street, and so I knew that those coats needed to move.
yeah.
So all the fabrics we chose and the way we cut those coats, there's a great tailor called Dan Ashworth at Cosprop, and working with him and John Bright. Um, they were cut very deliberately to move and to billow, and we really wanted that look, so that when she went down the street, it sort of took off.
I love this. This is just, I don't know why I love this so much, but I do. There's just the thought of these great clothes and how they move and how they fit. I mean, anybody who has ever had the opportunity to have something tailored for them, it's a completely different feel.
It is, yeah, it is. But it does take a long time. I mean, what's great about Saran is she's patient. There were
That's so.
days and days of standing there with a cup of tea while we tweaked a scene, three
Well,
millimeters, and with about five people around her, all doing pinning and tweaking, and you know, it's
you have to
it's a
have a
long
lot of patience.
process. You
Yeah.
do, you do.
My sense of her when we talked to her was, one of the loveliest people I've ever talked to,
She is really
just
lovely, yeah,
really out there.
and a hard
Uh,
worker.
So with Anne in Gentleman Jack, there's a lot of sides to Anne Lister, but there are two that we really focus in on in the program. One is the business side, and one is the romantic side. And I'm wondering if you could talk us a little bit about the business side, and what was your approach when you were putting that look together?
It was about, I mean, I felt like she'd want to take the men on at their own game, really,
Yeah.
and be as well dressed, if not, well, probably much better dressed than they were,
Yeah.
um, maybe with a bit more taste.
Yes.
So
Compared to the Rawsons, and we'll get to them
exactly,
in a minute.
that's
Yeah.
who I was thinking about. Yeah, but yes, I think it's important to me that she looks sharp, and that she, I think, I think she would have taken that on and thought about it carefully about how she
Yes.
presented herself, because
Yes.
she was presenting herself to so many different people and different layers and stratas of society. I think she would have had a sort of costume for each
You bet.
look. It helps her be the chameleon she wanted to be.
Yeah, and right. You used that term when we talked earlier about the chameleon part of Anne's life, and oh my God, I mean, right from the ground up, just the fact that she was transgressive in
Yeah.
that world,
Yes.
and then we layer in just her day-to-day life. So the business side, and I can absolutely see the real Anne Lister. This was not a woman who did not think.
No.
I
No.
can see her standing in front of her mirror, very carefully putting herself
Absolutely.
together, right?
Yeah, and you've got to remember that she was walking a really fine tightrope, between what she could get away with. It's not
Right.
only taking on and just, okay, I'm going to look a better businessman than these men, but I'm dressing like a man. It has to. She did wear skirts. She did wear corsets. She did conform enough,
Right.
just
Just
to
enough. Right.
just enough. Yeah, which
Yeah.
is kind of thrilling.
Yes.
It's kind of
It is actually. That's a great
powerful,
word
and
for it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. There's something in that game that that can give you a sense of power if you
yes,
can pull it off, right?
yes. And I think power's essential to Anne Lister. I think that's sort of, you know,
Yeah.
her own power, her own, Sally talks about her own mental health being incredibly strong. And
Yes.
I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah, yeah, you certainly get a sense of it from reading the diaries. It's a it's an ongoing statement of it's like a lifetime therapy session, quite frankly, to read those diaries. It's a
Yeah.
constant conversation with herself.
Yes.
Really spectacular. And
Yeah.
then we have the romantic side. And so now you're dressing her for courting, whether it's with Vera Hobart or Anne Walker, Mariana, excuse me.
Yes. Yes,
So,
there was some. I mean, it's often the waistcoats that, or you call them vests,
yeah.
that would be the markers. And there was a blue waistcoat with embroidery that we found at Cosprop that was made for another actor, a very
Oh,
famous actor,
oh,
which sparked a whole conversation of naming these costumes, which I won't get into because
oh,
it's
oh, oh,
Saran. You have to ask Saran
careful.
about that. Yeah, but
Yeah,
but yes,
I have to tell you, there's a line now. There's going to be a line of questions showing
I'm
up on my
sure. I'm
screen saying,
sure.
"Who was it?"
Yes.
Okay, it's totally okay. So,
Um,
go ahead.
but yeah, there was that embroidered waistcoat was a sort of key example of something that was it's a slightly softer, more feminine look for
Right.
the sort of courtship scenes,
Yes.
and it's more figure hugging, and it's still powerful, but it's a slightly more feminine feel
Yes.
to it.
I shared this with you in our first conversation that if you wanted to license a whole line of Ann Lister waistcoats, that you could have a very profitable little
That would
business
be
on the side.
nice.
So the other thing that you shared with me is the heart pin, and there actually was a lot of thought behind when she wore that, wasn't there?
There was. I can't take credit for all of that because I mean, we saw the portrait and decided to copy it, and then I think we used it. Did we use it for the first time she met Anne Walker? Went over to Anne Walker's. I think we might have
See,
done.
I don't know
Somebody will
about
tell
that.
me.
I'm sure
Yeah.
there's a bunch of people out there that can tell me exactly what it
Yes.
was.
I
I'm
mean,
not one of them.
the times that was used were very specific, and you know, uh,
Strategic.
strategic. Yeah, that's the word. And not always, I had a couple of moments where I thought, sort of wanted to cheekily throw it in as a slight red herring, but I was, that scandalized Saran. She was very, no, the heart pin is the heart pin and it is worn only at the,
Only for this. Oh, that's
yes, you
wonderful.
can't get, loose with the use of that.
So one of the other things that you had to keep in mind with Saran was that she was working out. She shared with us that she was trying to broaden her upper body to look like someone who was handling the kind of work that Ann Lister was handling. Was
Yeah.
that a bit of a challenge in the costuming?
No, because I started so early with Saran. That was what was really good. We started in November 18, I think.
Mm.
And or would it have been 17? 17. It was the November before the June filming.
Uh-huh.
So I had regular fittings with her, so we could adapt and follow as she did change her body. But I was doing very much the same thing. I mean, I was not myself, obviously, but I was trying to emphasize that masculine width of shoulder, and that was something we came up with in many, when she put dresses on, particularly
Oh my
when they were
God.
often off the shoulder, to make it look a bit wrong, to make it look a bit
Yeah.
not right.
No.
That's just
Yeah.
I mean, Sally wanted her to look like a bloke in a dress. It just
Yeah.
to be uncomfortable and
You
not right.
certainly accomplished that. I mean,
Thank you. So that was all about getting the shoulders to look as wide as possible.
it was a little teeth gritting when she first showed up in that ball gown.
Good, excellent.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So let's see, and then there's the corset. You had to do a little work with the corset, didn't you?
We did, yeah. We copied a corset that was in, I think it was Winchester Museum, and copied it exactly. And she wore it for the first big block of filming, and there was there was all that jumping on and off carriages and over walls. I mean, corsets were not meant to take that kind of abuse, and certainly not when you're doing many takes. So she started to get welts from it, and when it was taking a skin off, even with a chemise underneath the corset, you still can't do that much physical. But I was doing a ballet, Anna Karenina, at the same time. It was being built by some old friends, Parkinson Gill, who often make for me, and they came up with the suggestion and said, "Why don't you make it more like a ballet corset and add in power net?" So I mean, it's not historically that incorrect, because I did later see in the V&A in their collection there's a sort of summer corset which is constructed very similarly. It's got net panels in between the bones.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, it wasn't ever envisioned, this corset, but it did solve the problem. It did give her the same sort of mobility that a ballet costume, a ballet dancer would get. So it was a good solution.
Let's talk just a minute about that corset in the, well, first of all, Matt did share with us that, yes, that really is, for those of you who didn't see the Matt interview, that really is Saran Jones getting dressed in the opener.
Yep.
And you gave me a couple of reasons why it had to be Saran.
Yeah. I mean, one is it's her physicality. I mean, she spent years working on how Ann Lister moved and had that down to a T, and nobody else could suddenly, pull that out of the bag. So that was one very good reason. But the other was that nobody else would fit it, those clothes either. I mean, they were made to the millimeter of Saran's form. So, we had problems with that when we're doing handwriting. The rings wouldn't fit, but that was a very close fitting costume.
And tell me about, you did explain to me what that thing is that she's sticking down the front of her corset.
The busk. I think I've got it here.
The busk, and there it is.
That's
the real busk.
Yes. I used to work with this fantastic model maker called Nadia Rowe, Korean model maker who's now living in Poland. But I rang her up and said, "Help! I need some help on doing this." So she did the most beautiful job carving. I don't know if you've got enough light on this to see.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can see the family quote, and then the family crest of arms, AL, Shibden Hall, and the Yeah, the Rose of Yorkshire.
That's fantastic. I'm so happy that you shared that with us. And for those of you who have not been to Shibden Hall yet, that Latin quote that's on the busk is on the beam that runs across the side of the great room that leads to the stairway. Ann Lister had that put in, and the Latin translates to just and true of purpose. So,
Correct. Yeah.
let's see. And who made the costumes? Who
Um,
actually
it,
made them?
it was a mixture, but Cosprop made most of Anne's costumes. So it was John Bright and his team at Cosprop. But then there was all sorts of makers, freelancers. Parkinson Gill made some of the big things like the Queen of Denmark and
Oh,
Bear Hobart's wedding dress. Yeah, there was a whole team of people we pulled in.
fascinating. Just fascinating. I love this stuff. Um, let me see. Well, we're going to start talking about the other characters. I'm trying to remember the question that was in my head, and I have now remembered it. You must be working on costumes already for season 2.
I was until this sort of pandemic hit.
Yeah.
I was quite deep in it, and then this all stopped, and my sort of schedule has gone through the roof because I had it all beautifully lined up so that after filming I would then go on to doing a ballet, 2 ballets, and a new opera for the Met.
Oh wow!
So now that filming has moved, I've suddenly had to take all of 2021's work and try and get it done. So that's Cinderella behind me
Oh my
that
gosh!
I'm trying to get done
Wow.
before we start filming.
Wow.
So it's all got a little bit
Wow.
chaotic. But
and no, for those of you watching, I'm not going to ask them when they're going to start filming because it's still up in the air and nobody wants to talk about it. So,
but it is soon. I am.
yeah.
I need to get back to it.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
So let's move on and talk about the other characters and all those fabulous costumes that you did. You said that you wanted to paint them with a broad brush. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, yeah, I was concerned that I think it was something about 100 named characters that we sort of rattle through in the story, and I felt that we needed to be quite direct with letting the audience not only know the kind of person they were, but where they sit in this sort of social strata of there's so many layers of from the very, very poor to the very, very, very rich to the court. And where each character fits in that is really important in that kind of society. So yeah, as we worked through, that was a big concern, is fitting them in.
Is this something, when you talk about these characters and where they fit and the rest of that, does Sally have input on that, or is it sort of you and Anna, and how does that work?
It's first and foremost me and the actor. So we'll get together. I will sit down and say, well, I've got some ideas, and they'll send me their ideas, and I'll say, oh, well, here's some costumes we've pulled out for you to try. And it's just a costume fitting is a conversation, really. So it's about us talking about who this character might be and what we might want to say about that character. And the work in that first fitting, maybe it's the only fitting, it depends, then goes off to the executive producers and to Sally. I'll send photos from that and get feedback back. And sometimes I'll look at them and go, that's not quite right.
Not so much,
not so much on that. And we'll make changes, and occasionally we'll have to go back and do it again. But a lot of the time, touch wood, we'd get very few feedback. Okay, there'd be the occasion one where Sally would go, I don't think that's quite right, or maybe just do that more, or
Interesting. Wow. What a soup to mix all the ingredients into. It's really fascinating to me. So let's talk about let's move into the characters, and let's start with Anne Walker. Tell us a little bit about when you started thinking about Anne Walker. What was where did you start from?
I guess the starting point was that she's quite different from Anne Lister in terms of she does comply. I mean, that was my feeling, was that she did comply with. I mean, she's got such a pressure from her family and her wider family on her. It
Hmm.
feels like she was not in any way like Anne Lister in her dress, but she would be probably quite fashionable, a lot more wealthy. So she would have a wider range of clothes, and I think I generally dressed her in silk. I mean, so, and that would have been very different price wise. So yeah, she was more fashionable and more typical of the period, and
Mm.
I just wanted to sort of enjoy that contrast and that femininity.
Yeah, really beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. And the you were sharing with me that those puffy sleeves that we see so much of in season one, and most likely we'll see in season two, because you tell me that they disappeared in what year?
I think it's 1836. Victoria came to the throne, and I think she had a big influence. But it was almost overnight. They just kind of went, "No, gone. That's a terrible idea." And
Architects everywhere were clapping their hands loudly.
sure,
You
yeah,
didn't have to make those wide doorways anymore.
yeah. What's really interesting about that, about later on in that period, is it's not like now where we don't just throw dresses away and buy a new one.
Well
They would
put.
adapt them. So you see in late 1837, 38, you'll see that they'll take that big old jigo sleeve, they take the pads out, and they'll do things like pleat them.
Oh,
So you
wow.
get all these pleats. So it's the same dress, and all they've done is they've gone to a tailor or their lady's maid or
Right.
done it themselves and just done something with the fabric, pleated it, pulled it in, done some kind of decoration.
You were sharing with me earlier about some of the clothing that you got to see at the V&A or some of the other places that you went to, that you could see where the alterations had been made, and
Yeah,
have a sense of what else they had might have been before,
yeah.
prior to what it became.
Yeah, that's why it's really interesting to see original clothing, is because you can, if you can get to actually touch them, you can look inside and you can see the original color, and you can see where the original scenes were and how
Mm.
they were adapted, and they might have been handed down,
Oh my God.
later on in the. So you'll see an early 1830s dress that then's been adapted and changed, or then gone into the 1840s and changed again. And
Wow.
so yeah, it's a very different way of dealing with clothes than ours.
Especially now when we live in a world of throwaway fashion, literally
Really.
month by month now.
Yeah,
It's not, when I was a young woman, you invested in clothing and you literally would buy a suit that you expected to wear for 3 or 4 years,
yeah,
if not longer.
yeah.
And yeah, it's very different.
I mean,
Uh,
that's one of the things in the diary that's the most useful, is that's how I got so much detail about it, is because there's so many entries about Marion mending.
mm,
It's always
mhm,
Marion over breakfast, mending my pelisse or mending my stays or making,
right, right,
so
right.
it's really helpful. So
Yeah,
much of her costume is mentioned. There's waistcoats, gaiters, what else? There's petticoats, the Spencer that she wears. That's mentioned in the diaries.
right.
So the sort of structure of what she wears isn't really made up. It's in response to what's mentioned in the diary,
Oh,
and then
that's fantastic.
some liberal artistic license thrown in.
It's really fantastic. Um, so we probably will still see the sleeves because now we're in 1834 into 1835. But the other thing that's happening is Anne Walker is now moving out of that gilded cage of Crow's Nest and back into dark old Elizabethan Shibden Hall. I imagine that's going to set up some interesting situations with her look and her clothing, avoiding spoilers, but
Avoiding spoilers, but yeah, I'm very aware of that, and I think I will enjoy that.
yeah, yeah,
And maybe a series of different ways that we can respond to that move.
yeah.
And I think the fun of doing the second series is that there will, some of those broad brushstrokes of the first series can get softened, and more detail and more maturity can go into it, and a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking forward to, because the first series was about, oh, another character, and quick, tell who these people are. But now the audience know who a lot of these people are. I think some subtlety can go in, and some layering and some other things. So it's a sort of opportunity. It's
Oh, I love
exciting.
that. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that part. And the other thing is now in real life, Ann Walker's now living at Shibden Hall, and Ann Lister is going to be having a lot more influence herself. There's going to be a lot more conversation, I would think, between Ann Lister and Ann Walker about what Ann Lister might want to see her in, or how that might work with the two of them, or, one
And that
thing we
can go two ways.
yes, exact red. So this will be fun to watch.
And multiple ways, actually.
Yeah.
That could have all sorts of ripples and effects, but I'm
Yeah.
not going to say anything that I might get into trouble for.
One thing I'm relatively certain we're not going to see is the habit that many gay women fall into, which is that they wind up wearing exactly the same thing for different
Yeah.
occasions.
Yeah. I think that's
Not in Gentleman Jack.
probably not going to happen.
No, no. So now let's move on to let's move. Oh wait, that one last question I wanted to ask you. There is one dress that we only see Ann Walker in one time, and that's the red dress. Even though we see her in other things multiple times.
That's
Tell us
correct.
about the red dress.
Well, in the sort of lead up as we're sort of building a wardrobe, because that's really how I start prep is sort of building a whole wardrobe that then later I'll kind of go, okay, that's good for that, that's good for that. We were always talking about York as being the sort of apex of their relationship, of being at their kind of most happy and most. It's when Anne Walker really comes out of her shell and shows some confidence, and
Yeah,
it's a really great time for her.
yeah,
So we wanted that costume to be something like a slight.
yeah. And I
Intensity.
hadn't thought about that point when you and I first talked. I was just looking through some of the episodes just to jog my memory a little bit, and I found that one clip where Ann Lister is leading her to the coach as they're leaving, and she just sparkles,
Blooming, yeah,
man.
yes, and then it goes radically downhill very quickly.
Right down the old tubes.
Yeah, and I would have used that dress again, but there wasn't really. I never found there was never another high point. There was never another.
Right. Yeah.
She didn't have a great time. There was a lot of
Yeah.
bad stuff going on.
Yeah, it's a whole story.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the Rawson brothers. Tell us about the Rawson brothers and your approach to them.
I have to be careful how I put this, but there's a sort of Manchester kind of new money male
Yeah.
that I wanted them to be a bit showy, and and again working with the actors, they were both really good fun, really up for being sort of peacocks, really.
Yes.
They were sort of new money, and they would be very happy with that new money and wanting to show off their status in town. So yeah, we really enjoyed that, and
Yeah, that's fun.
peacocks.
I know that as a side note, Amanda Walgrove was doing a great impersonation in her videos of Jeremiah Rawson, and she made a point in it about talking about the curl.
Yes.
And the actor who plays Jeremiah actually reached out to her and said, "You're absolutely right. It's all about the curl." I mean, he was, laughing about that. So it's very cute.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about dear old Eliza Priestley for a moment.
Well, she was, yes, enormously good fun. I know Amelia Bulmore. She might be the reason I ended up on Talk Invisible, and I did a play on the West End with Jim Broadbent and her sort of Christmas Carol, where there was about 4 actors that played everyone.
Oh, wow.
And Amelia was just brilliant to work with, and brought Sally along to see that. And I think that's how Sally saw that mad show and thought, oh, maybe he'd be right to Walk Invisible. But
wonderful.
So I knew Amelia quite well. So when that fitting came up, it was just about seeing the script and seeing this sort of nosy neighbor and thinking, well, it's Amelia. That's completely different. So when we had our first fitting, I said, maybe she's a bit of a fashion victim. She's got so much time on her hands. She's got nothing else to do. Maybe the one thing she does is decorate hats and buy clothes, and and Amelia, being Amelia, could just pull that off and make that really good fun. And she was just hysterical in everything.
So fun. And I know that Steph has put that image up of Amelia in that beautiful sort of bluish purplish costume that she really does look a little bit over the top.
Yeah.
But she also informed you about something about her character and her husband.
Yes, it was. I think it was I think it might have been the first day of filming. There might be a slide there of her in the brown costume with a rather ridiculous kind of pelerine that looks like a castle.
Yeah.
And I was sort of earwigging on a conversation she was having with Sally and Peter, who plays her husband. And she was talking about how, despite um, Eliza being a bit of bit of a bigot and a nosy neighbor,
Yeah.
she's very compatible with her husband. They're always, of all the people, they're very they're very happy together. They
Yeah.
seem to be good companions. And as they said that, I noticed that I had maybe subconsciously costumed them almost in identical colors. And that
Yeah.
kind of made me laugh and thought, oh God, they're like those couples that walk up mountains in matching fleeces. And um I thought, maybe that's something we can pull off and
Yeah.
do. And so from then on, whenever we were dressing them, I thought, oh yeah, well, Eliza would have checked her husband before he left the house,
Right.
make sure
Exactly.
that they're in tune.
Yes.
So by episode 8, it's really getting quite obvious, and
Uh,
they're in very matching clothes by the carriage.
It's really wonderful. And then, of course, there's Marion. And Marion, I think, probably has she's most kind of the day-to-day wear, right? I mean, we never see Marion really dressed up in any way.
No, well, there's a couple of moments when she has the sort of date with where she
Oh,
tries.
right. Oh, John Abbott. Right. I forgot about
Yes,
him. Yeah.
yes.
Sorry.
But yeah, she's very, I mean, she had a lot less money than her sister. I
True.
mean, so she never wears silk. She never wears anything expensive. It's all cottons and it's all rather practical. And there's a lot of earth tone. There's a lot of brown,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's
Yeah. I imagine that's
all
going to kind of,
marrying.
again, not for spoilers, but I don't see how else that's going to happen in season 2 because she's Marion after all.
Yeah.
And I didn't ask you about Mariana when we talked before, but I know if I don't mention her, there is an entire segment of our audience that's going to be banging on my door. So when you dressed Mariana Lawton, tell me about that.
She's a great person to and another great actor to collaborate with, and yeah, that was fun because she's got loads of money. I mean, she's absolutely dripping in money, and that's kind of why she married, was for that wealth, and so clearly she's going to use it. So there were some really opulent dresses. There's a great gold one that came from Cosprop that
Yeah.
that she wears on the sofa with the two dogs, and I think that might progress more. I mean, I think we might see even more opulence on Mariana.
Oh, I bet. So, for a variety of reasons, I can certainly imagine why. We had a couple of more things that we were going to chat about in terms of the process and being on set and how that works, but we have already extended our time over the normal time.
Sorry.
So I think what we'd like to do at this point is get to the questions because I do have an entire load of those on my camera now.
Cool.
My phone. So we'll give the audience a chance to join us in this conversation, Tom.
Great.
The first one is from Judith Georges. You were filming during one of the hottest summers we've had in a long time. Did you have to make costume adjustments to account for this and prevent the actors from suffering too much?
We did. Yeah, no, it was, I mean, as beautiful as it was really, really tough. It was incredibly hot.
Mm.
So yeah, there were days when Saran just couldn't wear the corset, and I had to back down on the 3 petticoats that I was asking Sophie to
my
wear as Ed Walker. Um, um, and there were fans going up underneath, skirts and ice packs and you name it. I mean,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
I mean, I had the most brilliant team working with me, and so on set there was Ruth and Tyler who were looking after all the
Mm.
key actors, and yeah, as part of their kit, they were dealing with all that kind of problem, trying to get actors out of costumes whenever they could be, and yeah,
Oh
it
my
was
gosh.
tough. It was tough, but thankfully, um, it was a very, very good team that made the show.
No, that's great. Now, this one's from Elsie Jones and Marilyn Anderson. What was the most challenging costume to design / biggest costume design challenge in the show?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I think it's got to be Anne Lister for for the reasons I said earlier about the sort of name of Gentleman Jack and that nickname thing. I mean, it's rare that you get a costume, a character that's got nicknames, and you have to
Right.
answer all that. And maybe her going to the wedding, Fair Hobart's wedding,
Mm.
that needed to be a kind of, what do you wear to an ex's wedding?
Yeah,
That's yeah,
especially if you're going to wear black.
exactly, yeah.
Right.
So I mean, that was fun
Yeah.
doing that.
Where did you get the inspiration for her hat for that, by the way?
That came from, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, a painting by a French painter, Ong, who painted the Queen of Naples, I think it was.
Oh.
So it was a portrait that I just stumbled across and went, oh God, that's interesting. She's sort of wearing, it was Sally's idea that there should be a military thing
Mhm.
somewhere. So I
Interesting.
used that on the Spencer, the short jacket with all the braid. And
Mm.
so I saw that portrait and went, oh, the Queen of Naples is wearing a military sort of style hat. Well,
Wow.
that's something I can steal, and that makes me laugh. And I had this brilliant milliner who I've known for years, called Sean Barrett. And so I just phoned Sean and went, okay, here's a portrait. What do you think of this idea? And he made all the hats for
Oh, wow.
a lot of for Saran and for many of the characters.
Oh, wonderful. I'm assuming he made the top hat for Saran, right? Yeah.
Yes,
Wow.
yes.
That had to be something. This is from Lisa/Jenna. Did you design and make a hat as the real? Oh, okay. Did you design and make a hat as the real Ann Lister would have worn, or was it a top hat from the start? What is your opinion of the hats Ann Lister wore? Oh, what did they actually look like in your mind? Because she describes beaver hats and other styles in her diaries.
Yes, I think that's a really good question, and I'm very aware that a lot of people watching are, there's two camps, and so they cross over. There's the Ann Lister,
Oh yeah,
fans, and there's the Gentleman Jack fans, and there's people that like both. And
yeah,
to be clear, my job is not to reenact what I really think Ann Lister wore.
right.
My job is to dress Saran Jones in response to Sally's script.
Yes,
If it was a different script and a different actor, it would be a totally different costume.
right.
So I think that's a great question, because that hat was not what I
Right.
didn't. It was interesting actually, because at the time of filming, we didn't think that Ann Lister wore a top hat. We thought that she wore, there's mentions in the diary about a sort of beret or cap, or
Right.
this thing. And I did try all those things, and they just weren't working for me. And I'd been heavily influenced in my research on looking at George Sand, the French novelist,
Mm,
and
right.
the ladies of Llangollen, and with their top hats, and so I thought it's too good a look, and it instantly worked on Saran.
Yeah.
And so I was like, "Sod it, I'm going to do it. It's good." Uh, but there may be some new evidence that it may not have been wrong. She might have worn a top hat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but you could all, I leave that one for you
Right.
all to discuss. But yeah,
Right. For more discussion
yes,
online. Let's see. This is from Katie Bienview, and she's going to love that you're answering this question because I already sort of know how you feel about this. How do you feel about having your work recreated in the form of cosplay?
love it, completely love it. I mean, it's a great honor. I think
Yeah.
there's no greater flattery.
And,
I think
and
that's really, really lovely, and
we
it's
have
great to see.
uh, we have a few people that I've seen, especially in our little Facebook world. Katie's one of them, just is fabulous, a fabulous job. And Amber Targaryen, and I can't remember the end of that name, who started out doing cosplay with, maybe not started out, but has some great costumes from Game of Thrones, and now is into Gentleman Jack. I mean, it's really quite something. I'm
It
really
is. I'm
blown away by it.
endlessly impressed by what I see people, because they're not easy things to make. I mean,
No,
you
no.
know, you need to be quite a tailor to pull off those
It-
costumes.
It's quite a form of flattery, isn't it, to see your,
It
yeah,
is, yeah,
very
yeah,
nice. Yeah.
yeah. No, I mean, the whole response to the show has just been fantastic, and so exciting.
Yeah, it
And
really is.
I do follow the groups and things like that, because it is useful. It's good to know. It's helpful for me to know what lands and what doesn't land, and what
Yes.
people talk about. I mean, it gives me thoughts of what I can do better. And
Yes. And we talked about, yes, yeah, no detail left unfetishized, by the way. I mean,
right,
everything has its moment under the microscope. And especially now that our waiting time has grown longer and longer and
yeah,
longer,
yeah,
you know,
yeah. Sorry
but
about that.
we're still here. Um, this is from Diane Halford. Is it true that Sophie Rundle wore Paralines from the actual period when Anne Walker was alive? If so, where did you source it? Paralines, Perelines.
Pelerine, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the lace pieces that, I mean, actually, so did Marion. All of the pelerines are original.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, really?
yeah, yeah. I have a big collection of them that we bought from all sorts of places, markets. I mean, they are still available. I have to be
Wow.
careful what I say because I've noticed the prices of them kind of. I
Going up.
picked up some on eBay for incredibly low amounts of money. Um,
Wow.
but other ones I got from dealers, and you know, I
Is,
bought one just the other week actually.
define for me, please. Is this the sort of shawl thing that goes
Is this?
over?
Yeah, it was what I was talking about. The period being very all about widening the shoulders so to make the waist look small. So you
Right.
get these. So they're almost like antimacassars that you put on the back of chairs. It's that
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
lace detail that sort of the idea is that it exaggerates the shoulder,
Yeah.
um, and lays over that. So yeah, and Sophie wore them as Anne Walker, particularly in the early scenes. Um,
I have an Ann Walker question that we didn't get to, and that is there's a particular outfit that she wears when she's in Scotland that's kind of has a little tie. I mean, she's always walking around in her grief shawl,
yes.
and it has that kind of a little tie. She looks like a Girl Scout or something in those.
Yeah.
What influence what
Well,
influenced that
depression.
outfit?
The depression was that was just she was having a miserable time. It wasn't going well. She was cold. Uh,
Yeah,
Sally felt that she would just be cold the entire time, and
yeah,
and it was like she'd sort of given up a bit. It was a bit sort of the 1830s version of wearing your PJs a lot.
yeah. She's right. Eating popcorn and ordering pizza.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's get back to the audience. From Renora Siaman, aside from Ann Lister, how do you choose the costume color palette to tell the story for other characters like Ann Walker, Marion, and Mariana?
Um, Lovely question. I do color boards. I mean, that's the sort of first thing I do. Is I sort of rip loads and loads of colors out of magazines and sort of put them together, which is helpful sort of subconscious way, and then put them in piles per
Mm.
character. So I've done various boards, particularly for the next season, on each character, and there'll be a whole bunch of little color palettes. And
Wow.
I mean, I think that's a bit of a stage influence. I think there is a sort of cross pollination in the way that I work, and I'm very very aware of color on stage because that's one of the main tools you have. So I'm always thinking about the color of various characters, how they relate to each other. It's one of the biggest headaches of working out story days is who's wearing what and does it look good with each other and does it make
Right.
sense both in theory of what it's saying, but does it also work when there's six people sitting around the table? Do they work as a group? So
Yes.
yes, I do a lot of work on color. It's sort of one of the first things I do before going on to form and detail.
Right. And you talked about that. That's one of the questions that interview questions that we hit on earlier that we didn't get to, which is the idea of what you call story day,
Yeah,
of the things that happened during that day and the groups of people she might be with and that whole thing.
yes,
The
yes.
jigsaw puzzle that you
It's a
call it.
Yeah, it's a sort of jigsaw puzzle, particularly with Anne Lister, because she is likely to do several different things in that day. So I have to sort of pick the priority and go, okay, maybe her trip into Halifax is her priority for that day,
Ah,
over her meeting with you know somebody on the estate. So
wow.
it's not going to be the estate waistcoat that she's wearing; it's going to be the business one because she's seeing a solicitor that afternoon. So there's a lot of kind of figuring out each day and what takes precedent.
That's fascinating. That's going to give us something to look at when season 2 comes out, now that we know all this behind the scenes stuff. From, let's see, from Una Walsh, how close to Ann Lister's real life clothing were you in your designs? Did she really dress that impressively? Well, I'm not sure that we know, but that's,
I doubt it, to be perfectly honest. But that's not the function of the costume. The function of the costume is to suit the text.
right,
But having said that, everything is based on some kind of fact. So everything that she wears is mentioned in the diary.
right,
Her greatcoats, her gaiters, the skirts,
right.
petticoats. I don't think there's anything I put her in that is completely wrong.
Hmm.
Everything's possible that she wore, but it is theatrical. It is, the script is theatrical. It's sort of fun and it's entertainment. So, and it's about conveying that, and helping to convey that and make it fun to watch.
Right,
If it was a different story about Anne Lister, there would be a different costume.
right,
I mean,
right.
I liked Maxine Peake's version, and that costume suited that story.
Hmm.
But it's entirely different to the way we went. So
Yeah,
it's about responding to a script first and foremost, and then working with an actor. So
right.
there could be 1,000 different ways to dress Anne Lister, even
Exactly.
working from the same diary.
Exactly, because she had 1,000 different faces at the end of the day. I mean, just
Yeah.
amazing. From Lisa Durnley Davison, how much research would it normally take for something like To Walk Invisible or Gentleman Jack? So yeah, normally how much research would you do on these things?
Um, it really depends on what you get, but To Walk Invisible was, quite a panic for me actually, because I felt real pressure to. It has a similar pressure because everyone knows the Bronte sisters, and
Mm.
there's a similar massive, following. So I had to learn them very, very quickly, and I think I only had 6 weeks.
Oh wow.
And I was doing a show on Broadway at the same time, so I was that was thankfully I was introduced by Sally to the Bronte parsonage, and they introduced me to a great historian called Eleanor Houghton, who I got to help me on Gentleman Jack as well.
Oh
So
wow.
she kind of gave me a Bronte boot camp, and kind of went, this is the period, this is what it means, this is what I think about the sisters, and so I often find myself in that situation that I'll suddenly have to learn a period, or just 3 weeks before that I was learning about 19th dynasty Egypt for Akhenaten at the Met, and having to know all about that
Oh
and
my gosh.
give
Wow.
talks about that to donors. And I'm always blagging my way through history and learning, and you're just constantly reading as much as you can on every plane and bus that I'm getting on. There's always there's never enough research
My
you can
gosh,
do.
it's so fascinating what you do. I'm
It
really
is.
taken with it. Um, let's see that we have one last question, and this is actually from Livia, who you've met. She's
Oh,
behind the camera here, or behind our little screen. From Livia, identity and self-presentation go hand in hand, in particular when it comes to masculine presenting women such as Anne Lister. How do you feel your costuming helps Saran express that character's identity?
God, that's a tough question. I I mean, that was absolutely the intent, is to express that. Um, in a way, it's more of a question for Saran,
Mm,
because uh, I can only offer suggestions and see what sparks. I mean, that's really a lot of my job, is going, what about this? What about this? What is guiding an actor to make the choices that I think will communicate. But what Saran actually feels like, and informs the way she responds, is Saran's business. I can only
right,
go, I think this could help, and
right,
sometimes my suggestions are rubbish, and sometimes they're great. And the exciting bit is when you throw something and you go, try this, and
right.
it works, and you see a transformation in a fitting room, and suddenly you see an actor go, oh,
Oh
okay,
my.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
and then
it's
they
like
march off down the corridor to try it out, and it works, and you go, oh, yes,
it's really
yes,
a
yeah.
collaboration, isn't
It's
it?
really a collaboration, yeah, and that's what I get excited by, is that collaborative process. It's what it's about.
Tom, I want to thank you for joining us today. First of all, just personally, it's been such a great time talking to you. It's been fascinating. And I hope
Thank
when you
you.
come to New York to do something for the Met, you'll give me a ring and I'll buy you a cocktail someplace.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that very much. Yeah. Look forward to be back there.
Yeah, yeah. And we're looking forward to New York being back, but you know how that goes.
Yeah.
I do want to thank you for coming, and we'll all be looking forward to what you amaze us with in season 2. And now comes that time when we take you off the screen and you're alone
Cool.
all by yourself again. But thank you.
I'll cope.
Really.
I'll be fine. Thank you. Thank you for this experience. It's been really good fun. Nice
Thank
to
you.
speak to you. Cheers.
Excellent.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So that ends our interview with the fabulous Tom Pye, and I'm not kidding. I have had such a great time talking to him. He's just fascinating, and I think the things that we've all learned today are going to be fun to look forward to in season 2, which is actually going to happen sometime in the future, just like ALBW, the greatest event that's never actually been put on. I do want to take just a minute to thank the team, as usual, Steph and Livia behind our screen here, Cheryl McDonald sitting in. And I also want to take the time to thank one person who goes a million miles to getting me ready, which is no fun thing when I'm running around in a tizzy, and that's my wife, Brenda. And then finally, we have next up, we're going to have Anna Pritchard, who is the production designer for Gentleman Jack. That'll be coming up later in August. We'll be sending out the announcement about that soon. So we certainly hope that you tune in. As always, please take a look at, those of you who did not get a chance to see the entire thing online for any particular reason, it will be up on the Ann Lister Birthday Week YouTube channel. And so I will bid you adieu at this point, and I will bid you adieu the same way I've been doing since we started these at the beginning of the pandemic. Please stay safe. Please stay healthy, and above all, wear your mask.